I'm Beth Perell. My guest is Emily Bush, Executive Director of Bike Walk Central Florida. This is an organization that is focused on what? It seems like you're focused both on the joys of biking, walking, being outside, but safety, right? Is that a key?
Yeah, absolutely. The organization really, I think, focuses on civility and safety among people that walk, bike, and use small mobility devices with wheels. So wheelchairs, mothers with strollers, micro mobility devices like scooters, and any other type of small device that you would have with wheels. We will really want to make sure that our infrastructure is set up so that you can use any type of device that you need to, and have other options of other modes of transportation to get from point A to point B other than a car. We know that it's important to, be able to drive your vehicle where you need to go. But oftentimes we also know that some people can't afford to drive a vehicle, and it might not be necessarily convenient as well. And so we try to advocate and educate both the public and our policymakers on the importance of providing that infrastructure and ensuring that infrastructure is safe for everyone, from little elementary school children that are trying to get to school to our seniors who might want to get to a doctor's office or just go for a bike ride. So both for transportation and recreation.
So the word civility, though, as we kind of focus on that, that suggests the behaviors that all of us are exhibiting toward each other.
Absolutely. And creating an environment in which it's not hostile. You're not, you sometimes see drivers kind of take command of the road. This is my space. And that's not true. We have to share that space among everyone that moves in our community. And there are rules of our roadways as who gets the right of way. And so part of our educational message is to ensure that drivers and people walking, biking, and rolling understand who has the right of way, and how to be safe. You might have the right of way, but if a driver is distracted or the pedestrian is distracted, it's not creating a safe environment. So just watching out for everybody on our roadways.
So, this is pretty significant if you consider the stories of late, even within the last few months, about road rage and about pedestrians and how we in Central Florida always sort of top the list of the most dangerous spots. Do you want to speak to some of those more newsy aspects of this?
Sure. So the Dangerous by Design report started coming out over a decade ago, and it really pointed to the Orlando metro section as being one of the worst places in the country for people that are walking to be struck and killed. We, as the metro region, has gotten somewhat better, but other places have gotten worse. So we're now number 18 on that list, which is good. We're slowly coming off of that. But again, it's not necessarily because we're moving the needle of safety. Like I said, it's because other places are unfortunately getting much worse. We're seeing an increase just across the whole United States of distraction driving, aggressive driving, and then excessive speed. And oftentimes, our organization partners with law enforcement to enforce the driver yield law, among other laws, for pedestrians and drivers. But what we find is that some drivers just are going too fast that they don't even see people on the side of the road. So just again, that civility, just remember where you're driving. If you're driving through a neighborhood, drive the speed limit. You have no reason to do 50 miles an hour next to where, like I said, an elementary school children could be walking or biking to school. And so we try to bring that context into the conversation. There are other stats that state that, bicyclists get struck more often in Florida, but then there are some that say that we are a great place to bicycle. So it really depends on the news source, where they're kind of bringing that statistics in and how they're evaluating those statistics. The Dangerous by Design report in the past evaluated those statistics just on the number of people that were walking to work. They've expanded that definition now, and it's based on partly the population, because we know that people don't necessarily walk to work. That's a very small percentage of our population. And so we have to consider people that are walking for recreation purposes and their safety as well. Like I said, school children, our senior population, or just anyone that wants to go for a walk in their neighborhood. And so while the stats kind of vary across the board, Florida is a great place to walk, bike, and roll. We have beautiful weather the majority of the year. We're relatively flat, which makes it pretty easy for us to walk and bike in different places. Yet we really need to work on building connectivity in order to allow people to get to the places that they want to walk and bike and roll to. And that's, again, really where our organization focuses on the policy, the education, and really advocating for those complete and connected streets.
So I do want to talk about the connectivity, but just also to kind of wrap up the idea of civility and that personal action. I think, people might get defensive and think, oh, well, I'm a good driver, for example. I'm following the rules of the road. But you also have to sort of trust your fellow drivers and everything. I mean, if you're stopped behind a car that's waiting for a pedestrian to cross and you're the third car behind, you have to accept that people are stopped not just to irritate you, but rather because they're looking out for safety.
Absolutely. I'd like to try to explain and state, safety starts with you as a driver. And this is something that our Florida Department of Transportation has really kind of honed in on, because safety really does start with every single person that gets behind the wheel. I drive a big truck. So when I get into my 2-ton vehicle, I know that I could kill someone, even just doing 25, 30 miles an hour. And I take that very seriously and make sure that I am constantly checking in and around my vehicle when I approach crosswalks. Could someone dart and dash? Sure, that's against the law, but I'm going to watch out, especially at trail crossings, near school entrances, and when children are getting in and out of school. So as a driver, I'm very cognizant of my responsibility, even though it might not be the law, somebody else could be breaking, but I know that it's my responsibility driving a 2-ton vehicle, right? That could seriously injure or kill someone. And like I said, I try to reiterate that not only in when I talk to individuals, but in our messaging throughout Bike Walk, because most of the people that walk and bike are also drivers. And so we remind them that even when you get behind the wheel, remember what it feels like to be that person trying to cross the road, or feeling uncomfortable because that car got really close to you in that bike lane. And just, again, being really cognizant of your spatial awareness, taking your cell phones out of your hand and putting them down. Put on Do Not Disturb. Make sure you have your chill playlist on before you get behind the wheel and start driving. There's things that you can do to set yourself up for success, not only to make sure that you aren't harming anyone like your neighbor or a family friend or a little school-age child, but also so that you create that civility. You are that one person, and that's where safety starts with you. There are often times where we see in a community where we, as a driver, I know the rules of the road. So if I see someone stopping and I know that the cars ahead of me didn't see that person and they'll continue, I'll stop and I'll wait and I'll make sure that they visually make eye contact with the people walking and biking so that they know that I see them, and I will wait until they have completely crossed the road and it's safe for me to continue. So civility really begins with all of us, regardless of whether we're behind the wheel of a vehicle, whether we're on 2 wheels on a bike, pushing a stroller, or just going out for a stroll in our neighborhood.
Now, many people are biking or walking not for leisure, but rather on their way to the bus stop or literally taking themselves to work. I know you said that was a small amount of people, but usually they're going somewhere to get on transportation to go somewhere. And there are so many locations where indeed, if they are on that bike, for example, there's construction. They've got no choice but to be in the same lane with the car, and it gets dicey. What are your thoughts there? What is your advocacy there?
Sure. So there is a new federal regulations for ensuring that when there is roadway construction, that a proper maintenance of traffic is complete for those that bike and walk. That hasn't existed before. And so the Florida DOT is working on adopting those into their own manuals, and that's something that we are advocating for. And anytime we see where there is a construction of a new apartment complex or some type of development that blocks a Lynx bus stop, for example, we will advocate to provide an alternative way for that person walking, biking, or rolling to still have access to that location. It's difficult to track that across the multiple counties that we serve. And so we rely on the public and our partners to let us know when that's not happening so that we can make sure that we target our advocacy very specific, either to policymakers that can have that influence or going directly to the Public Works Department that maintains the permitting to allow that contractor to do that work and say, you're not following the rules of the road or the rules in general that allow these people to still have access where they need to go. So where we see it, Bike Walk staff and our board of directors and our volunteers, we will bring it to attention to those that we work with. But we often ask the community to let us know. We have an advocacy support request form on our website that allows for the general public to ask for resources or ask for help when they see something that they know is creating unsafe conditions for those that walk, bike, and roll.
Go ahead and tell us your web address then.
Sure, it is bikewalkcentralflorida.org.
Now, one aspect of, I guess we would call it connectivity, that I've personally noticed over the past decade is more and more of those wonderful overpasses that go over the big big streets, and that way people can safely cross. Has that made a difference and are more on the way?
So yes and no. They are, when put in properly at locations that you can't do what we call at grade crossings, they do work. Trails specifically where you don't necessarily want to stop at a traffic signal and wait, 2 to 5 minutes on occasion just to continue your journey. And so that's where underpasses and overpasses do help in those conditions. However, as an urban planner, I often try to advocate for at-grade crossings that are safe and visible for everyone that walks, bikes, and rolls, partly because it takes some additional time to go, zigzag to get up onto the bridge, go over the bridge, when really it might be easier and faster for someone, especially in a wheelchair that might not be an electric assist, to stay at grade and just wait for the signal and cross there. And so where appropriate, yes, we do advocate for those, but not everywhere is appropriate for that. In addition, from an economic development standpoint, if we're trying to, explain and ask trail users or ask people that walk, bike, and roll to spend their money at local shops and restaurants and different commercial businesses, they're going to fly over them and they're not going to patronize them. So in certain urban conditions, it's really kind of the opposite of what we want to see. We want to see better at grade improvements made for safety so that they can still access the places that they want to go to.
And because number one, it also sounds really expensive just to make one of those, I would think. Um,
Yes, they are in
but
the several millions of dollars.
yeah,
When a lot of times at grade improvements, still in the millions of dollars, but a lot less. You're not constructing, a vertical bridge over an existing roadway that typically does have the infrastructure that allows people to cross. People don't feel comfortable crossing there because of the driver behavior, because of the civility that we talked about earlier. So in part of what we do is advocate for making sure that drivers are aware that people cross there and make sure that the appropriate signage and the signals and the timing of those signals help to promote people to cross at grade, like I said, where appropriate.
Okay, so what would be the more appropriate and economical and sort of useful thing? Because the lights never seem quite to sync up. So, but is that where you would start?
So, yeah, there's something that we try to advocate for called a leading pedestrian interval. And it basically is just a few additional seconds added on to a signal timing. So, if a pedestrian pushes the push button, they are given the opportunity to cross the road a little bit ahead of before another signal changes. So, the green light for vehicles to go that same direction. This allows the pedestrian person cycling, who, and I can't say pedestrian, people walking and biking, your neighbors, children, right, to be visibly seen in the roadway so that drivers that are approaching it that might not look on the sides of the road see people in front. There is also a big push that we're trying to make for increased lighting at these intersections. People travel all hours of the day and night, and with daylight savings happening, we try to promote lighting at those intersections and even in-road lighting where appropriate, to brighten the crosswalk so that it's very obvious that someone is there. And it just brings more attention so that the driver knows someone is there. I need to stop my car and wait for them to at least get to the other half of the roadway in which I can then continue. And that is following the law. So there are a lot of municipalities, Florida Department of Transportation are implementing these safety countermeasures on a lot of their roadway projects, but we have thousands of miles of roadways and thousands of intersections. So it's going to take us a while to make sure that every single one of those has the parts and pieces for us to make them safe. The department is really trying to strive on places where we have a high injury network. Our communities are really kind of putting those resources where the more frequent and more severe fatalities and serious injuries are occurring. So it might not happen in someone's neighborhood right away, but it will eventually happen, hopefully in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And maybe by then we'll have other technology, cars will be flying, we'll have different problems by then. So, but starting now and starting with what we like to say is somewhat low cost engineering solutions that will help enhance safety for everyone across the roadway spectrum.
Emily, what is your service area? You mentioned several counties.
Yes, so we right now serve 9 counties. I will start with Orange, Seminole, Osceola. We've gotten into Brevard, Volusia, and Marion. This year, we've extended our services into Flagler, Lake, and Polk County. We're having conversations with Jacksonville and Tampa and Miami. We have several programs that have seen success in improving driver compliance to people trying to cross at different intersections. That's through our pedestrian safety program, Best Foot Forward. And so we're just trying to teach others what we're doing here locally. And if they want to emulate what we do, we then work with those partners to either expand that program into their community or set them up with the tools and resources to basically duplicate the program in their community if we can't support it.
Do these municipalities and Department of Transportation, do they come knocking at your door or do you go knocking at theirs?
So it's a little bit of both. We knocked on doors to get the program started. So we were very thankful for MetroPlan Orlando. That's the transportation planning organization in Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties that spearheaded the growth of the pedestrian safety program, Best Foot Forward. The Department of Transportation has asked that we expand that program, so they gave us some grant funding to do that in Brevard, Marion, Volusia, and now Lake and Polk. Other planning organizations have asked us to now come into their regions because they know that this program is a low-cost opportunity for them to look at data educate drivers and people walking on the civility of our roadways and the laws. And then we work with law enforcement partners to enforce those driver yield rates or the driver yield law and the varying laws that are associated with people walking and biking. So now, no, we're not knocking on any doors. We are being very strategic as to where we expand. Our organization is still somewhat small, though we've grown rapidly in the last 5 years. We want to be very specific and make sure that as we grow, we can still provide the support here locally in Central Florida, which is our home.
So, what are some of the wins you've had so far in this work?
So, wow, there's a lot to name. You know, the little wins I'll say are probably our biggest achievements, but they aren't necessarily things that we go and say that are big, right? So that could be adding a leading pedestrian interval at an intersection. That could be working with the Florida Department of Transportation to install a light or a mid-block pedestrian signal where none exists. Some of our wins have even been working with our other various municipalities, Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties, to just name a couple, on including certain crosswalks that we monitor within the Best Foot Forward program and enhancing those crosswalks, really adding the signage, the striping, mid-block refuge islands so that if a roadway is really long, a pedestrian has a break in the middle so that they can take a break before continuing. Some of these roadways are 100 feet long, and for our seniors and some of our little walkers, it's difficult for them to travel that amount of time in the 25 seconds we give them to cross the road. So we like to put feathers in our caps for these little wins. They do add up to making a huge improvement across the board, but nothing really significant other than that. We have been really supportive of some of the legislation and policy changes over the last couple years, and we are behind some efforts like the hands-free Florida legislation that the Florida Bicycle Association and the Naples Pathway Coalition are trying to push in the Florida legislature. We're also working with a couple other organizations to try to improve the language within the state statute. We haven't been successful in getting a representative or a senator to take that language to the floor, but we are working with our varying representatives to ensure that that language hopefully will be put into the statute soon. Some of the other wins that we've had are some policy that we've been able to help write and support, complete streets policies that we've supported throughout the last 5 or 6 years, meaning that a local municipality or a government agency has to put in sidewalks. They have to put in the facilities for people that walk, bike, and roll. It's no longer build a road and we'll have the development build the portion of the sidewalk as they kind of come in. That's not the case. So we've been really advocating for those types of things. But I would like to say it's the little wins that really make a difference. If you go to a community and you talk to them about, you know, the few seconds that they've been added to a lighted intersection just so they can walk across the road to the school that they're going to, and parents don't feel like they're going to get run over, that's a win. And though it's not, you know, it matters to that one person, right? It matters to that one that maybe we saved their life. We don't know. We're going to continue doing the work that we do to create that civility among all of us, even if it's not the big feather in our cap, right? Because all of this really does matter in the end.
I'd also like you to talk about the partnerships you have with organizations that have their own particular bent about walking or cycling and so on.
So we work with all types of policymakers and all types of different agencies, right? From the city of Orlando, who is very much, you know, very supportive of this work, does kind of go above and beyond the need in order to make sure that people walking and biking in downtown and some of these other really critical areas have the infrastructure and it's safe and it calls out attention. Other partners are learning about how to implement some of these tactics or countermeasures. And so our job is to really share this information across partners to make sure that they're aware that a partner down the street is doing this. We work with small cities from the town of Oakland all the way, like I said, to city of Orlando, to the counties and across the metropolitan planning organizations that manage the regional transportation system. So part of what our goals are is to not only just share this information, but to advocate for the other organizations that might be catching up to do so based on the best practices that are within our region already. We don't have to look to New York City and California to bring back things that we know work here in Central Florida. And our Best Foot Forward pedestrian safety program has been really good at sharing that information across the partners because the partners meet with one another and we talk about these things. We talk about the low-cost engineering opportunities to just improve safety. I'll give you an example. The city of Castleberry put in road signage. So these are paddles that are kind of outlined in a yellow or lime green. They have the state law sign on them, and they put them in the middle of the street, right next to a crosswalk. So it slows drivers down visually. We call that vertical deflection. And drivers will slow down. They don't want to hit the paddle, right? But it makes them just more aware that there's a crosswalk there. Where that's been installed at the city of Castleberry is in a couple different locations. One is next to an elementary school, and we saw the driver yield rate go from 36%, so about 1 in 3 cars stopping for people at the crosswalk, to 78%. So now 3/4 of the cars are stopping for people in a crosswalk. And we were able to, this project, by the way, cost the city of Castleberry, with the signage and the striping that's associated with it, was about $2,400. So very small cost, right? And we were sharing this in our steering committee meetings, in our agency partner meetings, and other cities have taken that and have implemented that in their community. And we'll go out and we'll test and see what the driver yield rate is. We'll collect data on whether or not the drivers are reacting to that specific countermeasure. And 9 times out of 10, we see the driver yield rate increase almost overnight. And we share the fact that this was a $2,400 project. It's not millions of dollars. We're not rebuilding roadways. We can do these types of things almost immediately in our communities. Our government agencies have operations and maintenance budgets where they can put signage and striping in if needed. And so that's really what we advocate for, is to look at just where we can overemphasize the crosswalk without maybe putting in all the flashing beacons and things to draw attention. Those are necessary in certain locations, but we don't have to do them everywhere. And so we like to share these type of low-cost solutions across the varying agencies. Like I said, we work all the way in Flagler County, Palm Coast, all the way down to Brevard County, Marion County. And so we're sharing all of this information in hopes that they too will add these countermeasures, add these types of signs and stripes where they see that that could be a benefit to their community.
Thank you so much for that example. And unfortunately, we are out of time. So let me give you an opportunity. Any final takeaways?
Just for your, listeners, every time you get behind the wheel, just remember that you are responsible for being a safe driver and you are responsible for the safety of those around you. And when you're walking and biking, the same applies. Stay off your cell phone. Don't be distracted. Make sure that you're following the rules of the road. And if you see any issues, let us know. Reach out to us via our website at bikewalkcentralflorida.org. And we'd be happy to help you either find the resources that you need or work to advocate to improve that specific intersection or that specific roadway. And we are a community advocacy organization, so we heavily rely on donations. So if you enjoy the work that we're doing and think that it's important for us to continue doing this work in your community, then let us know. Donate on our various campaigns and help us improve and expand our advocacy efforts across Central Florida.
Emily Bush is Executive Director of Bike Walk Central Florida. I'm Beth Perell.